Madison Cole never expected her name to appear on an invitation wrapped in gold foil again, not after everything she had been dragged through. Yet there it was, her ex-husband's new wife, Whitney Hale, personally inviting her to the Hale Foundation Winter Gala at the Plaza Hotel. Every instinct inside Madison screamed it was a trap. Whitney didn't send kindness. She sent poison, dressed in glitter. Still, Madison stared at the embossed card for a long moment, the edges trembling between her fingers. She had been invisible for so long, pushed out of the elite circle she once belonged to, blamed for scandals she didn't cause, left to rebuild her life at a tiny neighborhood bakery, while everyone else whispered about her fall from grace. Showing up would be walking straight into the lion's den. But her two kids, excited by the idea that mommy finally gets to dress up again, begged her to go. That was the problem. Madison had nothing to wear except a simple, worn dress she'd patched twice. She couldn't afford a stylist, let alone the kind of gown the plaza expected. And she knew that was exactly why Whitney wanted her there, to let the world see how far Madison had fallen. Her heart twisted at the thought of walking into that glittering ballroom, surrounded by diamonds, champagne, and the same people who'd once praised her, now waiting to laugh. But something inside her, some stubborn ember that refused to die, whispered that she had endured harder nights than this. She had survived the betrayal, the lies, the divorce that stripped her of everything but her children. She could survive this too. What she didn't know was that someone had been watching her quietly. Someone powerful, someone who remembered the woman she used to be and intended to remind the world. And while Madison prepared for the worst humiliation of her life, fate was preparing something else entirely. Something that would make the entire plaza gasp when the night finally came. There was a time when Madison Cole's name meant something in Manhattan. She had once been the quiet force behind some of the city's most elegant luxury events, orchestrating galas, corporate showcases, and high-profile fundraisers with a grace that made her indispensable. CEOs remembered her by name. Socialites trusted her more than they trusted their own assistants. Even her ex-husband, Adam Hale, used to brag that she was the secret engine behind his company's rise. But glamour was fragile, and Madison's world had shattered in a matter of weeks. It began with a rumor Whitney, then just an employee at Hale Industries, whispering to the right people at the right parties. Madison had been unfaithful. Madison was careless with money. Madison was unstable. At first, Madison laughed it off. She believed the truth always won. But in high society, truth rarely arrived before damage. Investors at Adam's firm grew uneasy. Board members asked quiet questions. A charity partner canceled a major contract, citing concerns about professionalism. Then one dreadful morning, Madison learned that several invoices, fake ones, had been filed under her name. Money had gone missing. Adam didn't even ask if she had done it. He simply said, coldly, "You've embarrassed me." The investigation cleared her, but the stain didn't wash off. Adam filed for divorce 2 days later, and Whitney, sweet-faced, lilting-voiced Whitney, had somehow moved into Madison's old life before the ink dried. The apartment, the private driver, the penthouse view, the invitations, and worst of all, the narrative. Everyone believed Adam had rescued himself from a problem wife. No one knew Madison had been the one funding the first years of his business. No one knew she'd built his network. No one cared. With the settlement stripped down by Adam's high-powered attorneys, Madison moved into a small rental above a bakery in Queens. She worked downstairs part-time, decorating cakes to pay rent, folding dough at dawn while trying not to think about the life she had once curated so beautifully. Her 2 children, Liam, age 11, and Harper, age 8, were her anchor. They were the only reason she hadn't collapsed under the weight of humiliation. She hid the worst details from them. She hid the nights she cried on the kitchen floor after they went to sleep. She hid the fear that her name, once respected, had become a punchline whispered behind champagne flutes. She hid everything. But children sensed pain. One evening, after a long shift at the bakery, Liam asked softly, "Mom, were you happier before?" Madison froze. Her hands trembled as she wiped flour from the counter. "I'm happy whenever I'm with you," she answered. But he looked unconvinced. The next day, the invitation from Whitney arrived. Madison understood exactly what it meant. Whitney wanted to display her, like a broken artifact from Adam's past, a reminder of how far she had fallen and how perfectly Whitney had replaced her. She probably expected Madison to decline, but Liam saw the card and lit up. "You should go, Mom. You used to plan big events like this. It'll be fun again." Fun. Madison hadn't felt that word in years. So she agreed, not for Whitney, not for Adam, not for the cackling socialites, but for the two small faces that still believed their mother was someone magical. What Madison didn't know was that the road to the plaza would not be walked alone. And the first sign of destiny shifting would arrive in the most unexpected form. A stranger stepping into her bakery at closing time, asking for a cup of coffee she didn't even sell. Because this stranger wasn't a customer, he was the beginning of everything about to change. And he knew her name before she even spoke. The bell above the bakery door chimed softly, an odd sound at closing time. Madison glanced up from wiping the display counter, expecting a neighbor picking up a late pastry. Instead, a tall man stepped inside, the kind of presence that made the tiny shop feel suddenly smaller. He wore a simple charcoal coat, snow dusting his shoulders, but something about him radiated quiet authority. "I'm sorry," Madison said automatically. "We're closing for the night." The man smiled, calm, polite, a bit amused. "I was hoping for a cup of coffee." She hesitated. "We don't actually serve coffee, just pastries." "Then maybe." He paused, eyes scanning her face, as if piecing together a memory. "Maybe a minute of your time?" Her heartbeat stumbled. Customers didn't talk like that. Strangers didn't look at her as though they'd been searching for her. Madison gripped the edge of the counter to steady her voice. "Do I know you?" "Not personally," he answered. "But I know who you are, Miss Cole." The last time someone said those words, it had ended in humiliation. Her guard snapped upward. "Look, if you came to ask about the rumors—" "I didn't," he interrupted gently. "I don't believe rumors. I believe facts." He spoke with a calm certainty that disarmed her. Madison blinked, studying him more closely. Strong jawline, eyes like winter, sky sharp, observant, yet warm in a way that felt foreign after years of cold glances. There was something undeniably familiar, but she couldn't place it. He reached into his coat and produced a small business card, sliding it across the counter. Draven Brooks, CEO Brooks, Aerospace and Tech. Madison froze. She didn't follow Billionaire lists anymore, but even she recognized the name. Draven Brooks was one of those unreachable, myth-like figures who built private jets, aerospace innovations, and a network of companies most people only read about in magazines. What on earth was he doing in her bakery? "I wanted to stop by," he said, "because years ago you saved one of my events." Her eyebrows shot up. What? 7 years ago, a corporate summit in Midtown. The keynote stage collapsed an hour before the opening. You rebuilt the entire schedule in 30 minutes. You didn't know I was the client behind it, but I never forgot. Madison tried to recall the event, but she had handled hundreds. "Why mention it now?" "Because someone with that kind of talent shouldn't disappear," Draven said. "And from what I'm hearing," his voice softened, "you've been pushed into the shadows." Her breath caught. Hearing a stranger say it, especially someone like him, felt like being seen for the first time after years of living invisible. "I'm fine," she lied. "No," he said quietly. "You're surviving. That's different." The room felt suddenly too still. He studied her for a long moment. "You're attending the Hale Foundation gala next week, aren't you?" She stiffened. "Yes." "How do you know?" "I know the Hales," he said simply. "And I know Whitney." That was all he said, but it was enough. It told Madison he understood more about her situation than he let on. Before she could ask anything else, he stepped back, adjusting his coat. "You won't be going there alone." She blinked. "Excuse me?" "You'll understand soon." And then, without another word, he turned toward the door, leaving Madison standing in the empty bakery with her heart pounding. The bell chimed again as he disappeared into the snowy night, leaving her with a feeling she hadn't allowed herself in years. Hope, dangerous, fragile, and impossible to ignore. Whitney Hale liked two things: attention and control. And the Hale Foundation Winter Gala gave her both, especially this year, now that she was officially the new Mrs. Hale. She floated through her walk-in closet like a queen surveying her kingdom, rows of designer gowns shimmering under soft lighting. Assistants trailed behind her like nervous sparrows. Madison actually RSVP'd, Whitney announced, examining her reflection in a jeweled mirror. Isn't that adorable? She must be desperate for validation. Her stylist, Elena, cleared her throat. Are you sure you want her there? She might what? Whitney's smile sharpened. Come wearing a dress from the clearance rack at Macy's? That's exactly why I want her there. She picked up a diamond necklace, letting it glitter between her manicured fingers. People forget quickly. I need a reminder, a visual reminder that Adam upgraded. She said the word upgraded with the kind of smug confidence that made her assistants exchange uneasy glances, but Whitney was oblivious. She was too busy planning her grand entrance, her on-camera interviews, her accidental photo ops. And front and center in those plans, Madison's humiliation. On a nearby table lay Whitney's seating chart. Media executives, financial moguls, old money families, and at the very bottom, Madison Cole, tucked beside a coat check station. Perfect. Whitney lifted her champagne glass. She'll walk in alone, underdressed, out of place. She took a slow sip. People need to see the difference between us. Elena hesitated, but Draven Brooks will be attending. If he knows Madison? Whitney's head snapped up. What do you mean, if he knows her? Elena immediately regretted speaking. I only heard rumors that he used to respect her work. Whitney waved a dismissive hand. Please, Draven Brooks wouldn't waste his time on someone like Madison. The man's practically royalty. Madison is Queens. The assistants forced awkward chuckles. But one of them, a younger woman named Callie, swallowed hard. She had worked Madison's events years ago. She knew how good Madison had been and how cruelly she'd been pushed aside. Whitney caught the flicker of sympathy in her eyes. Callie, Whitney said sweetly, you'll be stationed near the entrance. When Madison arrives, make sure the photographers are ready. I want plenty of before and after shots. Before and after? Callie asked quietly. Before me, Whitney smiled, and after me, %. Meanwhile, Adam Hale walked into the room, adjusting his cufflinks. Is all this really necessary? Whitney slid her arm through his. Honey, reputation is currency, and tonight I want the exchange rate at maximum. Adam didn't respond. He looked tired lately, constantly fielding questions about missing funds in his company. But Whitney noticed only what mattered to her. The cameras, the guests, and the opportunity to cement her place in New York society. Don't worry, Whitney purred. Everyone loves a redemption arc. Tonight, Madison plays the fallen star. Adam hesitated. And if she surprises you? Whitney turned, eyes sharp as cut glass. She won't. But even as she said it, a tiny ripple of doubt shivered down her spine, something she crushed instantly. Whitney believed in control, in planning, in orchestrating events with precision. Except this time, she wasn't the only one making plans. Because at that very moment, miles away in a quiet Queens bakery, Draven Brooks gently set his phone down after a call with his team. His voice was low, calm, absolute. She won't arrive alone, and she won't arrive unnoticed. Whitney smirked at her reflection, blissfully unaware that her perfect humiliation scheme had just met its first fracture. A fracture that would explode the night of the gala in ways she could never predict. The morning of the gala arrived with a gray, heavy sky, one of those New York winter mornings where even the sun felt too tired to show up. Madison stood in front of her tiny bedroom mirror, staring at the only dress she owned that might pass for formal. A soft navy blue sheath. Simple, modest, nothing like the gowns she used to slip into when she orchestrated elite events. It wasn't ruined. Yet. But, as she lifted it from the hanger, her heart dropped. A tear, small but unmistakable, ran along the side seam. The result of last night's subway ride, when a stranger's bag had snagged on the delicate fabric. She had pretended not to notice then. She couldn't pretend now. Her hands shook as she threaded a needle. She had stitched many things these past years. Backpacks, jackets, curtains, even Harper's stuffed unicorn, but fixing a dress she desperately needed tonight felt different. It felt symbolic, fragile. A reminder of the life she'd been shoved out of. Mom? Harper peeked into the room, hair messy from sleep. You look sad. Madison forced a smile. Just concentrating, sweetheart. You don't need a fancy dress, Harper said with innocent wisdom. You just need to be you. Madison blinked back tears. Kids had a way of seeing truth. Adults kept trying to bury. An hour later, with the dress successfully stitched, Madison felt a flutter of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could survive tonight. She'd walk in quietly, drop off a polite greeting, stay long enough for the kids to feel proud, then slip out before Whitney's trap fully snapped shut. But that fragile plan shattered when she went to retrieve her shoes. Only one heel waited in the box. The other was gone. She tore apart the closet, the bedroom, the hallway, nothing. Liam entered, munching on a granola bar. "Mom, are you okay? You're breathing weird." "My shoe," Madison whispered. "I can't find my—" "Oh, that?" Liam said casually. "Harper was playing dress-up with it yesterday. She said it made her look like a grown-up." Madison closed her eyes. Not Harper's fault. She was just a child. But the clock was ticking. The dress was patched, her nerves were frayed, and now she had one shoe. She sat on the edge of her bed, pressing her palms to her eyes. "Maybe I shouldn't go." Liam froze. "But, you said you would. You promised." "It's other as it." The disappointment in his voice cut deeper than any insult Whitney could throw. "I'll figure something out," Madison whispered, though she didn't believe it. Except something unexpected happened. A knock at the door. 3 firm taps. Not a neighbor, not the mailman. Too intentional. Liam rushed to open it before Madison could stop him. Standing on the front step was a tall man in a dark suit, a crisp winter wind flaring the edges of his coat. He looked like he belonged in a boardroom overlooking Central Park, not outside a tiny Queens apartment. "Miss Cole?" he asked. Madison's breath caught. "Yes?" "I'm here on behalf of Mr. Brooks," the man said, offering a respectful nod. "He asked me to escort you and your children today." Madison stared, stunned. "Escort us? To what?" "The Hale Foundation gala, ma'am." Her heart pounded so hard she felt it in her fingertips. "But why?" "I don't understand." The man didn't flinch. His tone remained steady, almost warm. "Mr. Brooks said, you might need a little help today. He also said you shouldn't worry about what you'll wear." Madison swallowed. "Why would he?" The man stepped aside, revealing something impossible behind him. A sleek black car. Polished, waiting, engine humming softly, and hanging inside the back seat window. A gown. A breathtaking gown she recognized instantly. A Brooks exclusive couture piece worth more than her annual income. Her legs nearly buckled. The man offered his hand. "Shall we?" Madison stared at the dress, the car, the man, her children's wide eyes. Then she heard the words that would change everything. Mr. Brooks said, "This is only the beginning." And in that moment, the world tilted in a way that promised nothing would ever be the same again. Madison Cole had forgotten what it felt like to be handled gently. For years, people either ignored her or examined her like a flaw in the wallpaper, something to be judged, dismissed, or stepped over. So when the chauffeur opened the door of the sleek black sedan and spoke to her with quiet respect, she almost didn't know how to respond. "Please, Miss Cole," he said, "allow me." End quote. Her children climbed into the back seat first, their eyes lighting up as they took in the luxurious interior, soft leather seats, ambient lighting, soft instrumental music humming through hidden speakers. Harper gasped and clapped her hands. Liam tried to act cool, but his widening grin betrayed him. Madison slowly followed, the gown hanging beside her like something out of a fairy tale. She'd never worn anything like it. She'd never even touched anything like it. The fabric shimmered subtly, catching the faint winter light. It wasn't just a dress, it was a statement. A declaration. A warning. A signal that someone powerful believed she mattered. The moment the door closed, the outside world faded. The car glided smoothly through Queens, heading toward Manhattan, each passing block pulling her further from the life she'd spent the last 2 years trying to survive. "Mom," Harper whispered, "is this real?" Madison swallowed hard. "I'm not sure." "Ethan," and Dejana. She opened the garment bag with trembling fingers. Inside was not one gown but 2. One for her, one for Harper. A tiny, glimmering dress that made Harper gasp loud enough to shake the air. At the bottom lay a dark, tailored suit for Liam. Her throat tightened. These weren't gifts, they were acts of restoration. As the car merged onto the bridge toward Manhattan, the chauffeur lowered the privacy divider. "Miss Cole, Mr. Brooks asked me to remind you that you're not to worry about fitting in tonight." "I always worry about that," Madison said, half joking, half aching. "That," he replied gently, is precisely why you shouldn't anymore." She fell silent. The skyline emerged, tall, shimmering, indifferent. Once she had belonged to this world. Once she had walked into corporate towers with purpose, orchestrated events in rooms filled with power. Now she approached it from the outside again, but something was different. Tonight, she wasn't entering as a casualty. Someone had opened a door she thought was sealed forever. The car pulled into an underground private entrance beneath the plaza. Staff were already waiting: makeup artists, a stylist team, a seamstress armed with pins and soft smiles. "For me?" Madison whispered. "For you," one of them replied. Mr. Brooks insisted. She almost laughed. "Why?" The stylist's eyes softened. He said, "You've been underestimated long enough." The team began their work: light makeup, gentle brushes through her hair, subtle touches that enhanced rather than reinvented. When they zipped her into the gown, it fit like it had been designed for her alone. The seamstress stepped back, breath catching. "You look," she murmured, "like the woman they never wanted you to become." Madison turned to the mirror and froze. She didn't look like the discarded ex-wife. She didn't look like the bakery worker barely scraping by. She didn't look broken. She looked dignified, capable, powerful. A version of herself she'd buried deep, thinking she would never see again. Before she could process the moment, a soft chime echoed through the room, her phone buzzing. An unknown number. Hesitating, she answered. "Hello?" A smooth voice replied on the other end. "Miss Cole, it's Draven Brooks. I just wanted to make sure everything is to your liking." Big 7-7. Madison exhaled shakily. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me," Draven said. "Just remember who you are." Her pulse stumbled. "Who am I?" she whispered. There was a slight pause. "The woman they should never have underestimated," he said. "And Madison, your entrance tonight will reflect that." Her heart pounded. "Entrance? What entrance?" Draven's voice held something like a smile. "You'll see. Step outside when the attendant comes for you. If you get we're examples, and we're aggressed." And then he ended the call just as a knock sounded on the dressing room door. A trembling staff member peeked inside. "Miss Cole, your helicopter is ready." Madison froze. Her world spun. And nothing would ever be the same after this moment. The last time Madison Cole had seen a helicopter up close was years ago, back when she arranged exclusive rooftop events for Manhattan's elite. She had stood on helipads giving instructions, coordinating VIP arrivals with precision and grace. Never once did she imagine she would be the one stepping into one. And certainly not tonight. The attendant guided her through a private hallway that opened onto the rooftop. Frosty air rushed toward her as the metal door swung wide. The night sky stretched overhead, vast and starless. And there, perched like something out of a billionaire's fever dream, sat a sleek black helicopter bearing the Brooks Aerospace insignia. Liam gasped. "Mom, that's a real helicopter." "Thanks for watching." Harper clutched Madison's hand. "Are we flying in that?" Madison's voice wavered. I think so." The whir of the rotor was low and steady, almost soothing. A pilot in a crisp uniform stepped forward and bowed his head respectfully. "Miss Cole, Mr. Brooks has arranged for you and your children to be transported directly to the Plaza helipad. It's a short flight." Madison blinked. "The Plaza has a helipad?" "Not for public use," the pilot said with a knowing smile. "Only for those with direct authorization. Only billionaires. Only the powerful. Only people who mattered." How on earth did she fit into that category? Her heels clicked softly on the metal surface as she approached the aircraft. Every step felt surreal, like walking into someone else's life. Her gown shimmered in the cold wind, hugging her frame gently. A few strands of hair brushed her cheek, lifted by the breeze. She felt beautiful. She felt terrified. She felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. The pilot assisted the children first, making sure their headphones fit comfortably. They squealed with excitement. Madison lingered at the door, suddenly aware of the gravity of this moment. "Miss Cole?" the pilot asked gently. "You're safe. Mr. Brooks wanted your arrival to reflect who you truly are, not who they tried to make you." She steadied herself and stepped inside. The door closed. The world quieted into a cocoon of soft lights and muted engine sounds. As the helicopter rose, Manhattan unfurled beneath them, glittering, restless, unapologetically grand. The city that had once chewed her up now looked breathtaking. Liam pressed his forehead to the glass. "Mom, look! You can see the Empire State Building." Harper pointed downward. "Everything looks tiny." Madison exhaled shakily, unable to stop the warmth rising in her chest. For the first time in so long, her children were experiencing something extraordinary, something she had not been able to give them until now. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. But she already knew who it was. Draven Brooks. "Don't be afraid of standing tall tonight. Some people need to be reminded of what they lost when they underestimated you." Her heart skipped a beat. Another message came seconds later. "Your landing will be visible from the ballroom windows. They'll be watching." Madison's breath caught. Of course. The plaza's grand ballroom faced Fifth Avenue. A helicopter descending onto its private rooftop would be impossible to miss. This wasn't just transportation. It was a statement. A statement Whitney would never see coming. Madison's pulse quickened as the lights of the plaza glimmered into view. The helicopter began its descent, the sound powerful enough to rattle windows, command attention, and silence entire conversations. Harper squeezed her hand tightly. "Mom, are you nervous?" Madison smiled softly. "A little." But beneath her fear, something steadier flowed, something she had forgotten she was capable of. Strength. As the helicopter touched down with a gentle thud, the pilot turned toward her. "Miss Cole," he said. "They're already gathering at the windows." Madison inhaled. Tonight wasn't about revenge. Tonight was about reclaiming her name. She reached for the door handle, and when it opened, the cold night air rushed in like a curtain rising on the performance of her life, and every eye inside the plaza was already on her. For a moment, the world held its breath. When Madison Cole stepped out of the helicopter, the wind lifted her gown in a soft ripple, catching the city lights like scattered stars. Her heels touched the rooftop with a quiet finality, a declaration that she had arrived not as the broken ex-wife they expected, but as someone reborn from the very sky. Inside the plaza ballroom, guests rushed toward the windows, champagne glasses trembling in their hands. "Who is that? Is that a helipad arrival? Is someone famous coming?" Whitney Hale froze mid-sentence, a brittle smile cracking at the edges. She had been bragging about her custom Dior gown when the roar of blades cut through the music, drawing every eye away from her. She turned slowly, almost unwillingly, to face the wall of glass. And her world stopped. Because walking toward the rooftop entrance, poised, radiant, unmistakable, was Madison. "Impossible," Whitney whispered. She couldn't, she wouldn't. But she did. Madison took a steady breath as the attendant opened the private stairway door. Harper held her hand. Liam walked tall beside her, and together they descended into the marble corridors of the plaza as if they belonged there. The soft lighting glowed against her gown, turning her into a living photograph, elegant, serene, untouchable. She expected nerves. She expected fear. But instead, she felt something else. Clarity. She had survived the betrayals, the lies, the isolation. She had survived losing everything. Nothing in this grand hotel could scare her anymore. As they neared the ballroom, the hum of conversation swelled, punctuated by gasps from people who caught a glimpse of her in the hallway. A pair of socialites Madison once knew elbowed each other, whispering furiously. "That's her? She looks different. She looks incredible." Madison didn't slow. She didn't shrink. She didn't apologize for existing, as she had so many times in the past 2 years. She simply walked. The ballroom doors opened. Music dipped. Voices faltered. Hundreds of eyes swiveled toward her. In a single sweeping moment, the entire room saw her. Not the woman, Whitney mocked. Not the rumor shadow. Not the ex-wife. A woman reborn. Liam stood taller with pride. Harper beamed. Even the photographers hesitated before taking the first shot, as if instinctively adjusting from capturing gossip to capturing history. Then the flashbulbs erupted like fireworks. "Madison?" a stunned voice called. Adam Hale stood near the bar, his whiskey glass shaking slightly. His jaw tightened as disbelief flooded his features. This wasn't the defeated woman he left behind. This was someone he no longer recognized and could no longer control. He stepped forward too quickly, mask cracking. "Madison, we need to talk." She met his eyes with calm, steady strength. "No, Adam. We don't." He blinked, thrown off, like a man who'd prepared for a fight but found himself standing in front of a mountain instead. Before he could speak again, whispers swept through the ballroom like a gust of wind. Is she alone? Who brought her? Someone arrived in that helicopter. Who was it? Whitney pushed through the crowd, fury simmering beneath her smile. She placed a possessive hand on Adam's arm and hissed, "She's trying to steal attention. Don't let her. If you're not some." But as she spoke, the ballroom's tall doors opened again. A man entered, slowly, confidently, a silhouette that drew the air from the room. Draven Brooks. And he wasn't looking at anyone, except Madison. He walked toward her with the quiet authority of someone used to being the center of every room and the unsettling grace of someone who didn't need to compete for it. "Madison," he said warmly, offering his hand. "Draven," she breathed, stunned. Every whisper died. Every camera froze. Every face turned toward them. And Whitney, watching helplessly from 3 steps away, felt the first true tremor of panic. Because just like that, the spotlight she controlled for years shifted permanently to the woman she tried to erase. For a moment after Draven Brooks spoke Madison's name, the entire ballroom seemed to forget how to breathe. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Glasses slipped slightly in stunned hands. Even the string quartet faltered, bows sliding across a violin with a soft, accidental squeak. In Manhattan, people recognized power instinctively, and Draven Brooks radiated it like a controlled flame. He wasn't flashy. He didn't need to be. The quiet confidence in the way he moved, the calm precision of his voice, the faint storm blue intensity in his eyes, it made every billionaire, socialite, and board member in the room shift uneasily. Draven Brooks didn't chase attention. He redirected it. And now, all of it was focused on Madison Cole. Whitney was the first to recover, at least outwardly. She stepped forward with a saccharine smile, hand outstretched. "Mr. Brooks, what an unexpected surprise. I had no idea you knew our guest." Draven didn't take her hand. Instead, he said, "Madison is not your guest. She was invited, yes, but she is here on my behalf." A ripple moved through the ballroom. Madison's breath hitched. "Draven." He gently raised a hand, not to silence her, but to reassure her. People leaned in, cameras lifted. The humiliation Whitney had planned was dissolving before her eyes. Adam shifted beside her, growing paler by the second. Whitney's smile wavered. "On your behalf? I'm not sure You don't need to," Draven replied calmly. "What matters is that her presence here tonight is not an afterthought, nor a convenience. She was brought here with intention." And Dephora. The implication was unmistakable. Whitney felt eyes turning toward her, whispering, questioning, doubting, something she despised more than anything. "Madison," Draven said, stepping closer. "May I?" He offered his arm. It was a simple gesture, but the meaning was seismic. She hesitated only a fraction of a second before placing her hand lightly on his arm. The warmth of his presence steadied her. For the first time that night, she no longer felt like a target. She felt like a woman reclaiming the ground beneath her feet. The photographers surged forward. Flash, flash, flash. Whitney's plan wasn't just cracking, it was collapsing. Adam leaned in, hissing under his breath. "Madison, what are you doing? You're embarrassing yourself." She turned to him, calm and resolute. "No, Adam. I stopped embarrassing myself the day I left you." A small collective gasp spread. Draven's lips curved slightly, as though he couldn't stop himself from appreciating her strength. But the night was far from over. A voice from the crowd called out, "Mr. Brooks, are you sponsoring the Hale Foundation now?" "No," Draven replied, eyes locked on Adam. "I'm sponsoring integrity tonight. And I stand with people who were wronged." Adam stiffened. That sentence pricked nerves too close to the rumors swirling about financial mismanagement at Hale Industries. Whitney sensed the shift and grabbed Adam's hand. "Let's not get political, darling. This is a party." But Draven wasn't done. He leaned toward Madison, voice low. "Would you allow me the honor of introducing you to the board of the International Tech Alliance tonight?" Many of them were curious to meet the woman whose work changed the trajectory of my company years ago. Madison's eyes widened. But they deserved to know the real story. Whitney almost choked. "What story?" Madison didn't. Draven turned to her, gaze sharp. "You've spoken enough, Mrs. Hale." The ballroom erupted in whispers. Whitney's face flushed anger, humiliation, fear blended into one. Madison stood taller. And then, At the edge of the crowd, someone began moving toward them with determined steps. Not a guest, not a socialite, a security officer. He whispered something urgently into Adam's ear, something that made Adam's face drain of color. Madison watched, brow furrowed. Something was happening, something big. Then the officer said louder, unable to hide the urgency. "Mr. Hale, we need to speak with you immediately. It's about the investigation." The investigation. Around them, people stilled. And in that moment, Madison realized, tonight wasn't just about her entrance. It was the night Adam Hale's entire empire began to crumble. The moment the security officer uttered the word investigation, the ballroom's atmosphere shifted like a sudden drop in pressure before a storm. Conversations evaporated. The string quartet stopped. Even the chandeliers seemed to hum with tension. Adam Hale forced a tight smile. "I'm in the middle of something important. This can wait." The officer shook his head. "Sir, with respect, it cannot." Whitney clutched Adam's arm. "What is this about? Why are you interrupting our gala? This is highly inappropriate." But the officer wasn't looking at Whitney. He was staring directly at Adam, whose face was turning a sickly shade of gray. "Mr. Hale, new evidence regarding the missing corporate funds has surfaced tonight." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Madison blinked, stunned. This investigation had haunted whispers in the city for weeks. People speculated quietly that Adam had misplaced millions. Others hinted someone else had been blamed. A few even muttered her name. But now it seemed the truth had claws. Adam tried to laugh it off. "Oh, please, this is ridiculous. If this is about the audit..." "It's not just the audit, sir," the officer cut in. "It's the forged documents, the ones tied to your ex-wife's name." The room erupted. Madison felt the floor tilt under her. Forged documents. Her name. She had been accused. She had been shamed. She had been thrown out of her life because of those documents. And now the world finally saw it. Draven shifted subtly closer to her, his presence a shield. "Madison," he murmured, "stay still. The truth is catching up." Whitney snapped. "This is absurd." Madison caused that chaos. "Everyone knows." "No," the officer said sharply. "We have video evidence showing someone in your office logging into your system the night the falsified invoices were filed." Adam's jaw clenched. Whitney's fingers dug into his sleeve. "Who?" she demanded. "Who accessed it?" The officer looked straight at her. "Your login, Mrs. Hale." The ballroom froze. Whitney stepped back as though slapped. "That's impossible. I didn't." "Adam, tell them." But Adam wasn't looking at her. He was staring at Madison, panic and guilt swirling in his eyes. "Madison," he choked out, "listen, this isn't." "Don't," she said quietly. Her calm hurt him more than anger ever could have. Whitney shook her head wildly. "This is a mistake. Someone framed me. Adam, say something." But Adam was already unraveling. He grabbed the officer's arm. "Let me explain." "No explanations," the officer replied. "You are required to come with us for questioning." 2 more officers approached. Whitney screamed, "You can't do this. Do you know who my husband is?" A board member sniffed. "We do. That's why they're here." The photographers went ballistic. Flash, flash, flash. What was meant to be Whitney's night of triumph had become a press-feeding frenzy. Whitney rounded on Madison, eyes blazing. "You did this. You ruined me." Madison held her gaze calm, steady, unbroken. "No, Whitney. You ruined yourself." Whitney lunged, but an officer restrained her. Cameras captured every desperate second. Adam hung his head. One of the officers said, "Mr. Hale, you're not under arrest yet, but given the evidence, you should prepare for charges." Whitney gasped. "Charges? For him too?" "For both of you," he replied. "Fraud isn't a one-person job." Whitney's knees buckled. Adam whispered, "Madison, please, help me." She stared at him, remembering every sleepless night, every lie, every humiliation she endured because he refused to defend her. "I did help you," she said softly, "for years. But you chose your truth. Now you live with it." Draven touched her back gently. "Come," he murmured. "Let's step away." "Dime." "Antoine." Whitney shrieked as officers escorted her out. Adam followed, trembling. But as the ballroom whispered, gossiped, devoured the spectacle, something else happened. A man in a tuxedo slipped through the crowd toward Draven and Madison, urgency etched on his face. Mr. Brooks, he said breathlessly, there's additional information you need to see. It concerns Miss Cole. Madison's breath caught. Me? He nodded. Yes, it appears there's something far more serious we've uncovered. Dash. And just like that, the night's chaos shifted its spotlight again, directly back onto Madison Cole. Madison felt every pair of eyes in the ballroom pivot toward her as the man approached Draven, his urgency impossible to mask. Moments ago, Adam and Whitney were being escorted out in disgrace. Now, suddenly, the tide had swung again toward her. Miss Cole, the man said, slightly out of breath. I'm Daniel Keene, Chief Compliance Officer for Brooks Industries. We uncovered something unexpected while reviewing the data tied to the Hale investigation. Madison's stomach tightened. What does any of that have to do with me? Daniel hesitated. Quite a lot, I'm afraid. Draven stepped forward, body angled protectively. Daniel, speak plainly. Daniel pulled out a small tablet, tapping it until a series of encrypted documents appeared: contracts, authorizations, transaction logs. These records were buried deep inside Hale Industries' system. Some were intentionally masked as routine vendor files. Others were partially deleted. Madison frowned. Deleted? Deleted what? Daniel met her eyes. Your work. She blinked, confused. Draven's jaw tightened. Explain. Daniel exhaled. Miss Cole, you weren't just the event specialist supporting Hale Industries' early expansion. Many of the company's most profitable partnerships, the international contracts that launched them into global markets, were brokered using your strategic proposals. Madison felt the room tilt. That's impossible. Adam said my role was minimal. He said the board didn't want my involvement. Daniel shook his head. Your proposals were used, your strategy decks were copied, your event frameworks were implemented almost word for word. But the credit, financial and legal, was given to Adam, and later, Whitney. Madison's breath caught in her throat. She felt as if someone had reached into her past and rewired the truth. Daniel continued gently, you weren't just removed from the company, you were erased from it. A murmur swept the ballroom. Madison gripped the back of a nearby chair. So they stole my work to build their success? Daniel nodded. And that's not all. Several documents show Adam used your intellectual property as collateral for early investors. Those contracts legally make you a founding contributor. Madison's knees nearly buckled. A founding contributor to a corporation worth hundreds of millions. Draven stared at Daniel with a slow burning fury. Was this intentional? Yes, Daniel said. Every indicator suggests Adam and Whitney hid these documents to prevent Miss Cole from claiming her rightful stake. Thanks for watching. The ballroom buzzed with outrage. That's theft. She could sue them. She could own half the company. Madison's heart pounded. But I didn't know. How could I? I didn't even have access to those files. Daniel lowered the tablet. Exactly. They restricted your access 2 months before the divorce. They made sure you couldn't discover any of this. Madison swallowed, voice trembling. Why tell me now? Draven stepped closer, his expression fierce with promise and protection. Because, Madison, you deserve to know the truth before the world does. There it was again, that feeling. Not fear, not confusion. Something rising inside her. Something rediscovered. Daniel cleared his throat. There's one more thing. Madison looked up, startled. There's more? Daniel hesitated. Yes. While digging through the old databases, we found a secondary file, a protected one. Connected to you. What kind of file? He looked genuinely unsettled. A personal dossier. Photos, emails, recorded calls, detailed logs about your movements. Madison felt her blood go cold. Someone tracked me? Daniel nodded slowly. For nearly 2 years. A collective shiver passed through the crowd. Draven's entire body tensed. Who had access to this dossier? Daniel glanced at the tablet, then lifted his eyes. There were 2 authorized users, he said quietly. Adam Hale and someone else. Who? Draven demanded. Daniel inhaled sharply. Someone who stood to gain the most from destroying your reputation. Madison braced herself. Daniel spoke the name. Whitney Hale. A heavy silence fell before a final thought struck Daniel, draining even more color from his face. And Mr. Brooks, there's a third name tied to the file. Someone still active. Someone monitoring her even tonight. Draven's eyes snapped to Madison. She felt the world freeze around her. Who? She whispered. Daniel's answer seemed to tear a hole through the air. The system shows. The third user is still inside this ballroom. Madison's breath stopped, and in that shattering instant, someone stepped out of the crowd, watching her with a look that made her blood run cold. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Madison felt the air tighten around her, cold and thin, as Daniel's words echoed in her mind. The third user is still inside this ballroom. End quote. Draven immediately shifted his stance, subtly placing himself between her and the room. His calm exterior didn't fool her. The tension in his jaw was unmistakable. Daniel, he said quietly, identify them. Daniel swallowed hard. The system shows a login from a mobile device connected to the gala's private network. The user is very close. Madison scanned the ballroom, pulse thundering in her ears. Guests whispered behind sequined hands. Some looked curious, others looked scared. A few looked downright thrilled. Manhattan loved a scandal more than dessert. Then a figure stepped forward. Not boldly, not dramatically, almost too casually. It was Callie, Whitney's youngest assistant, the one who'd looked uncomfortable earlier in the night, the one who had stayed quiet during Whitney's cruel remarks. Madison blinked, stunned. Callie? She was barely in her 20s, soft-spoken, nervous, easily overlooked. But tonight, she lifted her chin and looked Madison straight in the eye. I should explain, Callie said, voice trembling but steady. Daniel frowned. You're the third user? Callie nodded. Yes. A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. I didn't know what I was getting into, Callie continued. When I first joined Hale Industries, Whitney told me it was my job to monitor Madison. She said Madison was dangerous, unstable, capable of sabotaging the company. She said Adam needed protection. Madison's hands curled at her sides. Protection from what? From the wife he betrayed? Callie's face flushed with shame. I know that now, but I believed her then. Whitney can be convincing, and I was afraid of losing my job. Draven's voice was ice. So you spied on her. You collected information on her children, her routines, her habits. Callie's lips trembled. I didn't know they were using it against her. I just thought I was helping. Until recently. And Opal. Recently? Madison asked. Callie took a deep breath. Whitney made me track your finances. She wanted updates on how desperate you were. She asked me to record your visits to the bakery, your shifts, your arguments with Adam. And when she started manipulating the board, when the falsified invoices appeared, I saw things I shouldn't have. Daniel's expression darkened. Things like what? Callie closed her eyes. There were emails proof that Whitney planned everything. She framed Madison to weaken Adam's position. She wanted full control of the company, and she wanted Madison ruined so Adam would depend on her. Gasps spread through the crowd. Madison felt sick. It wasn't just betrayal, it was premeditated sabotage. A campaign designed to take everything from her. Callie continued, voice cracking. I was scared, but I copied the files. I kept them in case I ever got the courage to speak out. Draven stepped closer to Callie. Do you still have the files? She nodded shakily. Yes, all of them. Every email, every message, every order Whitney gave me. The ballroom buzzed with outrage. Show us. This is damning. She's finished. She's going to prison. Madison's throat tightened. Why tell us now? Callie looked at her with eyes full of guilt. Because when you walked out of that helicopter tonight, you didn't look broken. You looked like someone worth telling the truth to. Thanks for watching. For the first time since Callie stepped forward, Madison felt a flicker of compassion. But Draven wasn't done. Callie, he said, there's something you're not telling us. What aren't you saying? Callie's breath hitched. Her gaze darted to the far corner of the ballroom, toward the shadow of a balcony alcove. He's here, she whispered. Who? Madison asked. Callie's voice broke. The man Whitney hired to follow you when I couldn't. He's here tonight, watching. And he's not working alone. Before anyone could respond, a tall figure stepped out from the shadows, dark suit blending into the dim light. And he spoke Madison's name in a voice that chilled her to the bone. Hello, Madison. Long time. Madison's breath hitched as the man stepped fully into the light. He wasn't someone she recognized at first. Tall, sharply dressed, dark hair slicked back with meticulous precision. But his eyes, cold, calculating, knowing, stirred something in her memory. He smiled, a slow, practiced, unsettling smile. "Madison Cole," he said, as though savoring each syllable. "You look better than the last time I saw you." Madison swallowed. "Who are you?" Before he could answer, Draven moved in front of her, protective, controlled, dangerous, in a way the ballroom had never seen him. "State your name," Draven demanded, voice low and commanding. The man raised his hands in mock surrender. "Relax, Mr. Brooks. I'm not here to cause trouble." And, one free, ass come, Daniel Keene stepped closer, pale with recognition. I know you. You're Lucas Varner, private intelligence contractor." A ripple of shock swept through the crowd. A private investigator, hired to stalk her, paid to destroy her life from the shadows. Lucas gave a polite nod. "Former contractor, currently between jobs." Draven's jaw tightened. "You worked for Whitney Hale." "Among others," Lucas replied, "but she was my most entertaining client." End quote. Madison felt a cold shiver run through her. "You spied on me. You documented my life." Lucas shrugged casually. "It was work, nothing personal." "Nothing personal?" Madison's voice cracked. "You followed my children. You photographed my home. You fed lies to destroy me." Lucas tilted his head, almost amused. "In my line of work, clients don't want truth. They want outcomes." Draven took a step forward, slow, deliberate, lethal. "If you have additional information related to Miss Cole, you will hand it over now." Lucas raised a brow. "I will, but not because of your request, because Whitney didn't pay her last invoice. Stiffing me was unwise." Daniel pressed. "What did she hire you to do?" Lucas smirked. "Initially, to gather leverage on Madison, make her look unstable, financially incompetent, emotionally volatile. Easy enough, people see what they want to see." "Then it escalated," Callie whispered. Lucas nodded. "She wanted Madison to lose custody. She wanted Adam fully dependent on her. She wanted monopoly." A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. But Lucas wasn't finished. "She also asked me to plant evidence on Madison's devices. Emails that made her look like she was sabotaging Hale Industries." He smiled lazily. "The problem is, her husband wasn't as bright as she thought. Adam used the wrong timestamps. Amateur mistake." Madison felt her chest tighten. "Why are you saying this now?" Draven asked. Lucas's expression finally shifted just slightly. "Because some clients forget the golden rule. Never betray the person who knows your secrets." His voice dropped, cold and sharp. "And Whitney Hale betrayed me." From his coat pocket, he pulled out a slim encrypted USB drive. "Everything is here," Lucas said. "Every instruction she gave me. Every file stolen from Madison. Every order to manipulate Adam. Every attempt to erase her." Daniel reached for it, but Lucas pulled back. "Not so fast. If I hand this over, I want protection, immunity." Draven didn't blink. "You're confessing to multiple federal crimes. You think immunity is an option?" Lucas's smile widened. "With the right leverage, it always is." Draven took a slow step closer, his presence darkening the space around him. "If you threaten Madison in any way, directly or indirectly, your leverage won't matter." Lucas's eyes flicked to Madison. "I don't threaten assets. Madison was never the target. She was the currency." Madison flinched at the word. Currency. Not a woman. Not a mother. Not a human life. Just a pawn in someone else's greed. Lucas extended the USB at last. "I'm done playing for the Hales. Tonight, I switch sides." Before Daniel could grab the drive, a sharp, piercing scream echoed from the far end of the ballroom, shrill, panicked, unmistakably Whitney's voice. The crowd whipped around, and standing in the entrance was Whitney Hale, handcuffed, mascara streaked, and screaming. "Don't give them that drive. Don't you dare. You'll destroy everything." But Lucas only smirked. "Exactly," he murmured. And then all the lights in the ballroom went out. The moment the lights went out, a chorus of gasps filled the ballroom. Glasses clattered, heels scraped marble, and someone near the back shrieked as darkness swallowed the chandelier's golden glow. Madison couldn't see anything, only feel. Harper's small hand gripping hers. Liam pressing close. Draven's steady presence beside her, solid as a wall. "Stay still," Draven instructed quietly. Backup generators will kick in. But they didn't. Seconds stretched. Uneasy murmurs swelled. Panic threatened to bloom through the room. Then a single emergency spotlight flickered on, illuminating only Lucas Varner. He stood motionless, the USB still between his fingers, face half lit, half shadowed, like something out of a nightmare. People recoiled instinctively. "Everyone calm down," Lucas said coolly. "This wasn't me." Whitney screamed from across the room, still handcuffed, hair disheveled. "Liar! He did this! He's trying to disappear!" She lunged, nearly tripping, but an officer grabbed her arm to steady her. Lucas rolled his eyes. "Whitney, you flatter me. But if I wanted to vanish, I wouldn't do it under a spotlight." Draven stepped forward slightly, voice clipped. "Daniel, check the control room. This isn't a normal outage." Daniel moved quickly, weaving through the crowd. The emergency spotlight buzzed overhead, casting long, eerie shadows along the ballroom walls. Madison felt the hair on her arms lift. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. Still holding the USB, Lucas said, "The blackout wasn't part of my plan, but perhaps it's part of someone else's." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "Who? Why cut the power? What are they trying to hide?" Madison's throat tightened. "Is someone trying to silence you? Or me?" Before Lucas could answer, the ballroom doors burst open. 2 plaza security guards rushed in, carrying flashlights. "The outage wasn't caused by the hotel system," one announced breathlessly. "Someone manually shut off the breakers in the restricted maintenance wing." Infected, Daniel reappeared, pale. "They didn't just shut off the power. They wiped several network logs. Someone's trying to erase their tracks." All eyes snapped to Lucas. He shook his head firmly. "Don't look at me. I'm not the only one," Whitney hired. Whitney thrashed against her cuffs. "Don't listen to him. He's setting me up. He's..." But Lucas didn't even look at her. Instead, his gaze swept the ballroom with surgical precision. "There's someone here," he said softly. "Someone who shouldn't be." Draven's posture shifted, alert, protective. Madison held Harper closer. Lucas stepped slowly toward the center of the spotlight. "During my contract, Whitney insisted on a second operative. An overseer. Someone who could infiltrate Madison's life if I couldn't get close enough. Someone who blended in easily." Madison's heart raced. "Who?" Lucas didn't answer immediately. He scanned every face, every guest, every server, every shadow. Then he pointed. Not at a guest. Not at security. Not at staff. He pointed at a man holding a silver tray of champagne flutes, one of the catering servers Madison had passed earlier without a second thought. Except now, his expression wasn't neutral. It was ice. "That man," Lucas said, "he's not catering staff. He's ex-private intelligence. He worked for a covert repo firm in Chicago, skilled in infiltration. Name's Nolan Price." The room erupted. Nolan's hand twitched. The tray tilted, and Madison saw it. The unmistakable glint of a small device clipped beneath the tray's underside. Something that did not belong in a catering kit. Draven reacted instantly. "Everyone step back," he barked. But Nolan moved before anyone could obey. He dropped the tray. Champagne shattered across the marble. And with a chilling calm, he turned toward Madison and began walking straight at her. Lucas cursed. "He's here to retrieve the drive." Nolan's hand slipped into his jacket. Madison froze. Draven lunged. Security shouted. Guests screamed. Nolan reached her in 3 strides and grabbed her by the wrist. Madison gasped, and in a voice low enough for only her to hear, he whispered, "You were never supposed to survive this." Madison's entire body went rigid as Nolan Price's cold fingers clamped around her wrist. His grip was strong, not frantic, but controlled, practiced. He wasn't a man acting in panic. He was a man fulfilling an assignment. Her instinct screamed. Her heart pounded. But before she could react, Draven lunged toward them, fury breaking through his usually contained exterior. "Let her go," Draven barked, voice echoing across the darkened ballroom. Nolan didn't even flinch. Instead, he smirked, leaning closer to Madison. "You were supposed to crumble quietly. That was the plan. But you ruined everything by surviving." Madison's voice shook, but steadiness rose beneath it. "Then you underestimated the wrong person." "Thanks for watching." Nolan pulled her closer, using her as leverage. Several guests gasped. Officers hesitated, unsure if moving closer would escalate the situation. Draven's voice dropped to a lethal calm. Nolan, release her. Now. Nolan's eyes flicked toward the USB Lucas held. Give me the drive, or she pays the price for Whitney's mistake. Lucas grimaced. I don't take orders anymore. Then she dies instead. The words sent a shock through the room. Madison's knees nearly buckled, but she held her ground. She wasn't the terrified, powerless woman she had been 2 years ago. Not tonight. Draven took a slow step forward. You're not walking out of here with her. And you're not walking out with that drive. Nolan tightened his grip, voice cold. You think you can stop me? The blackout was staged for extraction. A backup team is already moving. Daniel checked his tablet, alarmed. He's right, someone accessed the staff wing 5 minutes ago. Madison's pulse thrashed. Harper whimpered. Liam clenched his fists, trying to be brave. She forced her voice steady. Nolan, I don't know what you think you'll gain. Whitney is finished. She can't protect you. Nolan gave a dark chuckle. Whitney wasn't my employer. Silence tore through the room. Draven's brow furrowed. What? Nolan leaned down to whisper in Madison's ear, but his words were loud enough for Draven to catch. I worked for someone much higher, someone who needed you gone long before Whitney entered the picture. Madison's stomach twisted. Who? Instead of answering, Nolan swiftly reached into his jacket, pulling out a compact device with blinking green lights. Lucas cursed. He's activating a data scrubber. He's wiping the evidence remotely. Stop him, Draven ordered. Security surged forward, but Nolan jerked Madison in front of him, using her as a shield. The device beeped rapidly, each sound a countdown toward erasing the only proof Madison had of her stolen life. Lucas tossed the USB to Daniel. Run, make a copy. Daniel dashed toward the corridor. Nolan snarled. I said stop. He raised the device, preparing to crush it in his fist. When Madison did something no one expected, she stomped down hard on his foot. Nolan shouted in pain, grip loosening just enough. Madison twisted away, breaking free. The device slipped from his hand. Before he could recover it, Draven crashed into him, tackling him to the ground. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Security swarming, guests screaming, flashlights slicing the dark. The data scrubber skidded across the floor, blinking violently as it slid toward the edge of the stage. Daniel turned. Madison, get the device. She sprinted, gown trailing like a comet, heels striking marble, racing against the blinking countdown. She reached out, and just as her fingers brushed the device, a hand shot out of the shadows, grabbing it first. A hand belonging to someone she never imagined would touch it. Someone who should have been nowhere near the ballroom. Someone who looked straight at her and whispered, You weren't meant to survive, because I wasn't meant to let you. Madison froze, because the hand holding the data scrubber wasn't Nolan's. It wasn't Lucas's. It wasn't anyone she expected. It belonged to Adam Hale. His hair was disheveled from the earlier chaos, his tie crooked, wrists red where the officers had cuffed him. But his eyes, those familiar, calculating eyes, were colder than she had ever seen them. He lifted the scrubber calmly, as if he were simply picking up a dropped appetizer. Adam? Madison whispered. What are you doing? He sighed, almost tired. Cleaning up a mess. The same mess I've been cleaning since the day I married you. Lefix? Draven stepped protectively in front of Madison. Put the device down, Adam. Adam laughed, a thin, brittle sound. Or what? You'll shove me again? You think you own the room because you walked in with your helicopter stunt? Draven's jaw flexed. This isn't about the gala. This is about the crimes you committed. Adam scoffed. Crimes? The only crime was trusting the wrong woman to play her role. Madison felt her chest tighten. My role? What role? Adam turned to her, expression twisting into something sharp and venomous. The supportive wife, the silent wife, the wife who didn't ask questions, the wife who didn't demand credit. You failed spectacularly at all of them. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Daniel shouted from across the room, tablet in hand. Adam, step away from that device. Destroying evidence during an active investigation is a federal offense. And for really? Then let it be another item on my list, Adam muttered. But Madison suddenly saw something beneath the fury panic. Desperation. A man who had always lived on the edge of his lies. and now felt the ground collapsing. Lucas, bruised from the fight, smirked. "I told you, Hale. You never should have let Whitney hire me. I learned too much." Adam swung toward him. "You think I care about your threats? You're nothing but a glorified thug." Lucas shrugged. "Maybe. But now I'm a glorified thug holding your freedom in a USB stick." Adam's hand tightened around the scrubber. Madison stepped forward. "Adam, stop. Don't do this. Think about your children." For the first time, his expression flickered. "My children? They're better off without a mother who—" "Don't," Madison said sharply. "Not tonight. Not ever again." The power in her voice made several people straighten. Draven added coldly, "You're not walking out of here with that device. And you're certainly not rewriting history one last time." Adam exhaled shakily, eyes darting between the USB in Daniel's hand and the scrubber in his own. "This ends now," he muttered. He raised the scrubber, ready to slam it into the floor, destroying the evidence Madison needed to clear her name. Madison lunged forward. "So did I," she whispered. Before Adam could react, she knocked his arm upward. The device flew into the air, spinning wildly. Gasps erupted as it arched over the ballroom. Draven dove to catch it. Lucas reached simultaneously. Daniel shouted, but the device didn't fall into their hands. A gloved hand reached out from the crowd and caught it effortlessly. Everyone turned. A figure stepped forward, someone Madison had barely noticed throughout the night. A man in a dark velvet suit, expression unreadable. "Who?" Daniel began. The man held up a badge. "FBI," he said calmly. "We've been monitoring the Hale investigation for months. And this," he lifted the scrubber, "is exactly what we needed." Adam staggered backward, face draining of blood. You tricked us." "No," the agent said. "You incriminated yourself." He turned to Madison, voice gentler. "Miss Cole, you should know. Your name has officially been cleared, and you may want to prepare for further restitution. Your intellectual property case is now federal." Madison's knees wobbled. Draven steadied her with a hand on her back. Adam lunged toward the agent in blind panic. "You don't understand. She can't win. She can't." The agent stepped aside as two officers grabbed Adam. But Adam wasn't looking at them. He was staring at Madison. Wild, furious, terrified. "This isn't over," he hissed. The FBI agent glanced at Madison. "Miss Cole, would you like to respond?" Madison lifted her chin. "It is for you, Adam." In that moment, Adam finally broke. He screamed as the officers dragged him away. And just as the ballroom regained its breath, another officer ran in, shouting, "Agent Cooper, we located something else. Something in the rooftop hangar that concerns Miss Cole." Every head turned sharply, and Madison felt her heart stop, because whatever was waiting for her on that rooftop was about to change everything again. Madison followed Agent Cooper and the Plaza security team through a private stairwell that spiraled upward, each step echoing louder than the last. The chaos of the ballroom faded below, replaced by a chilling quiet that made her skin prickle. Draven stayed beside her the whole time, silent, steady, a presence she leaned into without realizing. Liam and Harper walked between them, holding hands, sensing the weight of the moment. At the top of the stairs, a metal door stood ajar. Cold winter air seeped through the crack. Agent Cooper turned to her. "Miss Cole, what we found may be difficult, but you have a right to see it." Her breath hitched. "Is it dangerous?" "No," he said. "Just revealing." He pushed the door open. The rooftop helipad glistened under the moonlight. Frost sparkled on the concrete, untouched except for a row of footprints leading toward the helicopter Madison had arrived in. But that wasn't what made her freeze. A small metal case sat near the aircraft unlocked, lid open. Inside were stacks of printed documents, photographs, and a sleek black binder labeled Cole Dossier, Primary Target. Madison's hands trembled. Draven stepped forward cautiously, scanning the area. Agent Cooper lifted the binder. "This was hidden inside a storage compartment of your own transport. Someone intended to remove it later tonight." Madison's throat tightened. "My transport? The helicopter?" "Yes," the agent said. "It means the operative Nolan Price likely accessed it before you arrived. Or he expected to board the aircraft after retrieving the data scrubber." Madison stared at the binder, dread pooling in her stomach. "What's inside?" The agent opened it carefully. The first page was a surveillance photo of her holding Harper's hand outside the bakery. The next, her sitting alone in her apartment window. Another, her crying in a grocery store parking lot months ago. Each picture had timestamps, location tags, behavioral notes. A cold wave washed through her. These were used to build a psychological profile, Daniel whispered. They studied you, your routines, your pressure points. Madison felt sick. Draven's jaw clenched with visible anger. Whoever ordered this didn't just want leverage, they wanted control. Agent Cooper nodded. And there's more. He pulled a sealed envelope from the bottom of the case. Madison Cole final directive. Her breath caught. Directive? He unfolded the paper. And the words written there made the world tilt. It wasn't threatening violence. It wasn't extortion. It wasn't a smear campaign. It was worse. It was a contract termination request for Nolan Price, signed by Adam Hale 2 years earlier, dated before their divorce was finalized. And the directive wasn't aimed at hurting her physically. It ordered the dismantling of her professional reputation entirely. Every job application she sent, every event firm she tried to join, every connection she attempted to rebuild. Adam had paid operatives to sabotage them. All of them. Madison staggered. He destroyed my future on purpose. Draven caught her elbow. Madison. Her voice cracked. He didn't just let me fall. He pushed me. He made sure every door stayed closed, every chance vanished. Agent Cooper added quietly, "There's a secondary signature." He flipped the page, and Madison's heart stopped all over again. Because next to Adam's brutal order was another name, one she never expected. Miriam Cole. Her mother-in-law. Madison whispered, No, she wouldn't. But the agent shook his head. She co-sponsored the directive. She's been financially tied to these operations from the beginning. The realization hit like a blow. The whispers behind her, career collapse, the sudden hostility, the board turning against her, the charity partners withdrawing. It wasn't coincidence. It was family-endorsed destruction. Draven's voice softened, low but unshakably firm. Now you know the full truth. They didn't just betray you. They engineered your downfall. A tear slipped down her cheek, but not from weakness. From clarity, from freedom. From the first moment, she understood none of it had ever been her fault. But Agent Cooper wasn't done. There's one last piece, he said, kneeling beside the case. A document sealed in the inner compartment. It's addressed directly to you. Madison stepped forward, pulse racing. He handed her the envelope. Her name was written in a familiar, looping script. Her breath froze, because the signature belonged to someone she thought she'd lost forever. Her sister. Madison stared at the envelope in her hands, her breath trapped somewhere between her lungs and her heart. Her sister's handwriting was unmistakable, rounded, gentle, almost musical. A handwriting she hadn't seen in nearly 5 years. Because her sister, Evelyn Cole, had vanished from her life long before the divorce, long before Adam destroyed her career, long before everything fell apart. Her disappearance had been a wound Madison never discussed. Draven stepped closer. Madison, do you want me to open it? She shook her head. No, I need to do it. Her fingers trembled as she broke the seal and gently unfolded the letter. The first line made her knees weaken. Maddie, if you're reading this, it means they finally failed. She pressed a hand to her mouth. Agent Cooper exchanged a glance with Daniel. Keep going, Miss Cole. Whatever's inside may be crucial. Madison continued. I tried to warn you. I tried to come back. But they shut every door, blocked every message, erased every attempt. Adam didn't just go after you. He went after anyone who could help you. Her vision blurred. The words swayed. Evelyn hadn't abandoned her. Evelyn had been cut off, silenced. She forced herself to read the next lines. Your mother-in-law paid to have me followed. She knew I was digging into the company's finances. She knew I'd found proof that you were the true architect behind Hale Industries' biggest contracts. I was going to bring it to you. And that's when everything changed. Madison felt her stomach drop. Draven's jaw tightened. Your sister discovered the truth years ago. Actually something, Daniel whispered. They buried her involvement to keep Madison isolated. Madison swallowed and kept reading. Maddie, they didn't just manipulate your life, they rewrote it. They painted you as unstable, so you wouldn't believe anyone who tried to help you. They made sure you felt alone. Her chest ached. But you were never alone. I've been documenting everything, storing copies in multiple places. If you're reading this letter, it means one of those copies finally resurfaced. Innie says. Agent Cooper leaned forward. That binder wasn't planted tonight by the operative. It was hidden years ago. Your sister hid it. That means, Daniel added, this sabotage was even bigger than we thought. Madison read the final paragraph. If they come for me, I'll disappear. But don't stop fighting. You are worth more than the life they tried to confine you to. One day, the right person will see your strength and pull you out of the shadows. And when that day comes, everything they did will come back to destroy them. A tear rolled down Madison's cheek. She blinked hard, steadying herself. Evelyn's letter ended with, find the truth, Maddie, and take back everything they stole. I love you. Always. The wind swept across the rooftop, lifting the edges of the pages like a final whisper. Draven gently touched her shoulder. Madison, your sister believed in you long before any of us understood what was happening. If it wonderous, Madison nodded slowly. She tried to save me. And now, Draven said, holding her gaze with quiet intensity, we'll finish what she started. But Agent Cooper was still kneeling beside the metal case, eyes narrowing at something beneath the binder's lining. Miss Cole, he said, voice tightening, there's an additional compartment. Madison stiffened. Another. He pried it open. Inside was a flash drive. Small, silver, labeled with one word, Origin. Daniel inhaled sharply. This might be the earliest record, maybe the blueprint of everything. Agent Cooper stood and handed it to Madison. Miss Cole, this belongs to you. Her fingers curled around the device, cold and heavy with truth. But before she could say a word, a sudden crack echoed through the rooftop air. A gunshot. Everyone ducked instinctively. Draven pulled Madison behind him. Agent Cooper shouted, Sniper, get down. And replay. And as the rooftop lights flickered, a shadowed figure appeared on the helipad's edge, aiming straight at Madison. The gunshot cracked through the rooftop like splitting ice. Madison felt Draven shove her down, his arm wrapping around her shoulders as he shielded her with his entire body. Liam and Harper were pulled behind a concrete barrier by Agent Cooper, their terrified cries piercing the cold night air. Another shot rang out, sparking against the helicopter's landing rail. Sniper on the northwest edge, Cooper shouted. Everyone get to cover. Madison's heart hammered. She clutched the flash drive, labeled Origin, hands trembling. Someone wanted this buried so badly, they were willing to kill for it. Draven lifted his head just slightly, scanning the rooftop with sharp, calculating eyes. He's not aiming to scare us. He's aiming to erase the evidence, and you. Madison swallowed hard. Who is he? Before Draven could answer, Lucas Varner, breathing heavily, bruised from the earlier fight, slid across the concrete and dropped behind the barrier with them. It's not Nolan, Lucas said. Nolan was the distraction. This guy is the cleaner. Cleaner? Daniel whispered. Lucas nodded grimly. Someone hired to eliminate loose ends. Meaning all of us. Another bullet sliced across the concrete inches from Madison's hand. Draven grabbed her wrist and squeezed. Stay low. I'm not letting anything happen to you. Even through terror, Madison felt the steadiness in his touch anchor her. Agent Cooper shouted over the wind. Sniper is repositioning. He's moving toward the ventilation tower. Lucas cursed. He's trying to get a closer angle on Madison. Whoever contracted him wants her gone tonight. Madison pressed back against the barrier, breath shaking. I never wanted any of this. I just wanted the truth. Everyone. And that, Draven said, is the most dangerous thing you can want in a corrupt empire. Before she could reply, a glint of reflection flashed from behind the ventilation tower. Lucas shoved Madison down. He's about to fire, but the shot never landed. Because someone else, standing on the far side of the rooftop, fired first. A counter shot. Precise. Controlled. Deadly. The sniper staggered back, dropping his weapon before collapsing behind the tower. Agent Cooper whipped around, stunned. Who fired that? None of my men are in position. A figure emerged from the rooftop access door. Dark jacket, steady posture, firearm lowered. Madison's breath caught. Evelyn? She whispered. The woman stepped forward, face half lit by the rooftop floodlight. It was her sister. Older, hardened, alive. Hello, Maddie, Evelyn said softly. Madison's knees nearly gave out. You're alive? How? Why? Evelyn holstered her weapon. I disappeared because I had to. They were hunting me the same way they hunted you. But when I found out tonight's gala was going to expose everything, I couldn't stay away. Draven watched Evelyn carefully. You've been tracking the Hale investigation? For years, Evelyn said. I tried to get the evidence to Madison, but every attempt was intercepted. So I went underground, and I stayed close enough to monitor activity. Tonight was the moment everything aligned. I have Grace. Agent Cooper approached cautiously. You took out the sniper. Evelyn nodded. He was hired through a shell contractor, Miriam Cole Controls. And if he succeeded, the flash drive would be destroyed, Madison would be dead, and every trace of the conspiracy would vanish. Madison covered her mouth, tears welling. You saved me. Evelyn stepped closer, placing her hands gently on Madison's cheeks. I should have saved you years ago. I'm sorry, Maddie. It's Brossash. Madison leaned into the touch, trembling. I thought you abandoned me. I never left you, Evelyn whispered. I was fighting for you, in the shadows, where they couldn't reach. Draven touched Evelyn's arm. We need to get everyone off this rooftop. Miriam won't stop here. She has more operatives. Agent Cooper nodded. You're right. We need to move now. But Evelyn shook her head. We can't leave. Not yet. Daniel blinked. Why not? Evelyn pointed toward the helicopter's undercarriage. There's something else, she said. Something they hid where they knew Madison would never look. Madison's pulse quickened. What now? Evelyn crouched, reaching beneath the aircraft's frame, and pulled out a second metal case. This one marked with a single word. Inheritance. The wind howled across the rooftop as everyone stared. And in that breathless moment, Madison realized the conspiracy wasn't just about destroying her past, it was about stealing her future. The metal case labeled Inheritance felt heavier than anything Madison had held in her life. Evelyn placed it in her hands with a look that was equal parts sorrow and pride. You weren't just being watched, Evelyn said softly. You were being robbed of credit, of safety, of your entire future. But this is everything they tried to bury. Thank you for watching. And Prisonin. Agent Cooper knelt and opened the case. Inside were legal documents, trust agreements, sealed contracts, and most shocking of all, an unsigned transfer of ownership for a 28% share of Hale Industries, drafted 10 years earlier. Daniel gasped, This is massive. Madison, this contract proves the company was originally structured to include you as a legally protected stakeholder. Madison stared. Adam said he built everything himself. He built nothing, Evelyn said gently. You did. Ezra. Draven placed a steady hand on Madison's back, grounding her. With this, you don't just expose them, you own them. Agent Cooper added, and Miriam Cole will face federal charges for contracting illegal surveillance activities. With Evelyn's testimony and the recovered evidence, the entire operation collapses. Madison inhaled slowly, feeling the weight of years finally lifting the lies, the slander, the pain, the shame. All of it washed away under the force of truth. Draven turned her to face him fully. Madison, the world will know the truth now, and not because you begged for justice, but because you fought for it. She searched his eyes, warm and steady. I'm scared. Courage isn't about being unafraid, he said softly. It's about standing anyway. Below them, the ballroom lights flickered back on as emergency systems rebooted. Officers escorted Miriam Cole away in cuffs. Whitney, already detained, screamed that she had been framed. No one listened. Adam sat slumped, broken, stripped of power and illusion. Every injustice had been returned to sender. Liam rushed toward Madison, throwing his arms around her waist. Harper followed, clutching her tightly. Madison dropped to her knees and held them both. We're safe now, she whispered into their hair. I promise. Evelyn knelt beside them, eyes glistening. Maddie, you have a future again. The one they stole. The one you deserve. Daniel approached carefully. The board will have no choice but to recognize your ownership. With the evidence, they might even appoint you interim director. Madison blinked. Me? Draven squeezed her hand. Who better? You built their foundation. Now you get to rebuild it the right way. She exhaled. The idea frightened her and thrilled her. Agent Cooper closed the final case. Miss Cole, tonight marks the legal end of the Hale regime. Tomorrow, the world will know your name for the right reasons. Everyone? As the rooftop settled into silence, Draven stepped closer, expression softening in a way few ever witnessed. Madison, he said quietly, you don't have to face the next chapter alone. If you want, she placed a hand on his chest, feeling the steady heartbeat beneath. I don't want to be alone anymore. Not after tonight, not after everything. Draven smiled, warm, relieved, certain. Then consider this the beginning. He pulled her gently into his arms. She let herself lean into the moment, into the warmth, into the promise of a life rebuilt not from fear, but from truth. Below them, New York shimmered vibrant, awake, reborn, just like her. Tonight, the world had watched her fall from the sky. Tomorrow, it would watch her rise. And as Draven whispered, "Welcome back, Madison," she realized something powerful. She had already won. You know, now that our story has come to an end, I want to talk to you for a moment. If you're still here, listening, feeling this with me all the way to the last second, then something in Madison's journey must have touched your heart in a quiet, personal way. And maybe that's because her story isn't just fiction, it's a mirror. A reminder that no matter how badly the world tries to break you, you can rise again. The Stoics used to say, the obstacle is the way. And tonight, Madison showed us what that really means. Every betrayal, every closed door, every painful moment wasn't the end. It was shaping her, sharpening her, preparing her for the life she truly deserved. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Sometimes the hardest chapters lead us to the strongest version of ourselves. So, if you're going through something, breathe. You're not done, and you're not alone. If this story gave you even a little hope, a little strength, or a reason to believe in your own comeback, then stay with us. Like, share, and subscribe so we can keep healing, learning, and rising together. Because your story, it's still being written.